Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Stanek. I'm the Associate Director of the Office of National Fellowships. I'm really excited to have all of you here today. We are going to have a fantastic presentation. We have representatives from Department of State Foreign Service as well as USAID Foreign Service. They're going to talk to you about their careers, and then I'll turn it over to you all to ask questions. And if you do have questions, please just feel free to put them in the chat box, and I will read them to our guest speakers before we wrap up. And then after that, I will hopefully, having now been inspired to become Foreign Service officers, I'll talk to you all about the different fellowships that might help you get there. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Hubler with the Department of State.
Great, thank you very much, Josh, and welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to be talking to you all virtually, although I always prefer doing it in person. And I did have the pleasure last year of speaking to a number of FSU students on the campus, which was really great. Together with James, in fact, was my first presentation way back in the fall of 2019. So I'm a diplomat in residence. It really means that I'm a State Department recruiter, and I'm one of 16 diplomats in residence assigned coast to coast. So from the East Coast to the West Coast, we cover the entire United States. I cover Northern Florida, Southern Alabama, and Southern Georgia. And before I get started on my presentation, I just want to highlight this website, careers.state.gov. This is really where you want to go for information, in-depth information on State Department careers and how you end up in such a career. So the typical background of a U.S. diplomat has changed over the years. In the post-World War II period, we were typically referred to as pale, male, and Yale, primarily Caucasian, primarily from the Ivy League schools, and then also primarily males. In fact, up until the early 1970s, females joining the Foreign Service could rise through the ranks, but if they got married during their period of service, they actually had to resign from the Foreign Service. So that was up until the early 1970s. Since then, we've come I would say, a pretty good distance on gender balance in the State Department. We're at about 40% female representation. I've served under female secretaries of state since Madeleine Albright, our first female secretary, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, and a number of my ambassadors have also been females. Ethnic and racial diversity, we're still working on that. We've got a good ways to go on that front, and geographic diversity as well. So we're also looking for geographic diversity, again, getting away from the all Ivy League school composition of the State Department. My own background, I'm Asian American. My grandmother was Japanese, born in a small fishing village off of just outside of Nagasaki. She was married to a French businessman who was actually active in what was then Indochina before it became Vietnam, and lived in China as well. So I have that background on my dad's side, Hungarian, Austro-Hungarian immigrants who arrived in the US in the 1920s. I am a graduate of the University of Southern California, so not quite an Ivy League school. And I also was in the US Army before coming into the Foreign Service. I served for 3.5 years before taking the Foreign Service officer test in 1991, and then entered the Foreign Service in 1992. I was in the Army just at the end of the Cold War, so I knew, in fact, I was in Germany on the East-West German border when the wall literally came down on November 9th, 1989. And so I kind of knew that, this was a major shift, a turning point in history and world history, and figured that my future lay with the Foreign Service. And so 29 years later, here I am looking back on that career. I came in with the German language already. You do not have to have a language to enter the Foreign Service, but I did come in with German, and then the Foreign Service actually gave me training in Spanish, Macedonian, and Russian. About 4 months of Spanish language training, very intensive, and then 10 months each of Macedonian and Russian language training for my different assignments. The picture that I'm showing at the bottom here, this is kind of a Hollywood depiction, sometimes a Hollywood depiction of diplomats kind of, you know, carrying the sidearm and, you know, action figures blowing things up. And there's another agency that does that, but we don't work for them and we're not recruiting for them. The other extreme of the depiction of a foreign service officer is we're kind of stiff bureaucrats wearing pinstripe suits and, you know, sort of hobnobbing with the elites at cocktail parties. And part of that is true. And I am here to tell you that if you join the Foreign Service, you will have to eat and drink for your country. And receptions are a big part of that. You'll do dinner parties. I can't really tell the anecdote that I told at my first event with James about how I dropped a shrimp canapé into the pant cuff of a woman who was standing next to me at a reception, and I was faced with the difficult decision of whether to reach down and try to retrieve that shrimp or tell her that I had just dropped shrimp into her pants. She was talking to her husband, who was considerably larger than I was, so I decided against that, or simply to walk away. And so as a good diplomat, I walked away. But again, the reality of, you know, our profession is we're not really the action figures necessarily. At the same time, we're not always that stuffy bureaucrat that you sometimes see in the movies. So this is a quick collage of the different posts that I've been assigned to, and I'm going to walk through it pretty quickly and tell you a little bit about what I did in each one of these countries. So my first assignment in 1992 was in Frankfurt, Germany. And I was a political officer, so I was responsible for analyzing political developments in that part of Germany in the aftermath of the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Germany. So a lot of what I was doing was seeing how relations were going to shift as Germany was now a unified country and we were past the era of the Cold War. So I did a lot of reporting on that, covering 3 different states in Germany, and then sending that reporting back to Washington. The next picture, and I skipped one, is over here on it's the second picture from the right, the building with the red roof. That's the Opera House in Costa Rica, one of the few buildings that was remaining after the earthquake in the early 1960s. And I was assigned to San Jose, Costa Rica for 2 years as a vice consul, where I did primarily consular work. I did a lot of visa interviews. I did some American citizen services, so I would visit Americans who were imprisoned. I would help Americans who had lost their passport or had their passport and money stolen. I would help people get back to the United States if they were not able to do so. I helped hospitalized Americans, helped to medically evacuate them back to the United States if they needed treatment here. We provide a full range of services. We usually say from the time Americans are hatched to the time they're matched to the time they're dispatched. So we do birth certificates, we do the validation of marriage certificates abroad, and then we also do, in the unfortunate case in which an American citizen expires abroad, we then ship the corpse back to the United States. We also ship their belongings back to the US. And of course, visas are a big part of what we do. Visas for those who are traveling to the US as students, as tourists, as business persons, and also those who are traveling to the US to become immigrants. After Costa Rica, I went to Washington and served there for 5 years. I had planned to do one short 1-year tour in Washington and then get back overseas, but I got pulled into the Washington, sort of the swirl of the policy world, and really enjoyed the 5 years I spent there, starting out at the Operations Center, our 24/7 sort of 911 call center for anything that's breaking around the world. So I was briefing the Secretary of State on events that were going on in Iraq at that time. I wrote a report that went to President Clinton at the White House on an incident that occurred off the coast of Namibia. Really a fascinating tour, about 1.5 years in the Operations Center. I then moved to the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, where I worked on peacekeeping planning for our mission in Kosovo, and put that together actually with colleagues from USAID. We also worked with Pentagon colleagues from the CIA, the NSC, the NSA, and other US government agencies, as well as other international organizations, to ensure that the peacekeeping operation would be as effective as possible. And it still continues today in Kosovo. And then my third tour was in Washington on the Guatemala desk, where I worked on human rights and labor rights issues. So fascinating time there. At the end of the 5 years, I was then transferred to Ethiopia. These two pictures in the middle, where I spent time 2 years as the regional refugee coordinator for the Horn of Africa. And my job basically was to go into refugee camps and to interview the refugees, talk to the NGOs that were working there, talk to the UN agencies that were working there, and to ensure that the aid that we were providing for refugees in the Horn of Africa, about 1 million refugees at that time, was being used effectively. And we had about $30 million in assistance, humanitarian assistance that was going into the region. I just included this picture of a Coptic priest in Ethiopia just because of the beauty of the landscape in the north. I got to travel to all parts of Ethiopia as well as 5 other countries in the Horn of Africa. So I covered Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Kenya, Sudan, and Somalia. And this is probably the best tour that I had in my foreign service career. And the reason for that is, first, the work was very fulfilling. Secondly, for 2 weeks of every month, I was out in the field. And a lot of times my office was basically a Toyota Land Cruiser with a satellite phone, extra rations, I had bottled water, I had extra fuel and a tent, as well as sleeping bags. And my driver and I would go out to these refugee camp areas, and we just got to see fantastic parts of the country, and also to do work that I found personally very rewarding. So after Ethiopia, again, this was 2 years, I moved to Macedonia. Having never considered the Balkans as a place to work, I ended up in the Balkans and spent 4 years actually in Skopje, Macedonia. So these two pictures on the right. And my job there was basically conflict stabilization and peace building. We were working with the government as well as with opposition parties there to ensure that the ethnic Macedonian dominated government worked with the ethnic Albanian opposition to implement the terms of a peace accord that had been signed in 2001 to put an end to the civil conflict there. So for 4 years, I worked together with my colleagues from USAID, excellent colleagues there, and then also with our colleagues from NATO and from the European Union to sort of move jointly and keep pushing the Macedonians towards NATO membership as well as EU membership. And by 2008, Macedonia had qualified for NATO membership. The only outstanding issue was the name issue with Greece, which was finally resolved. And this year, they actually became members of NATO. So from Macedonia, having done Macedonian language, which we called Russian for babies because the grammar was very simple, I decided to tackle Russian itself. And I ended up in St. Petersburg, Russia from 2009 to 2012. This was during the famous reset between Russia and the United States when we were trying to work on areas where we saw common interests. So we did a lot of work together on counter-narcotics, on preventing the smuggling of nuclear materials out of Russia, and then also did a lot of work with them on human trafficking and preventing human trafficking. So this is St. Petersburg in the summer, the famous church on the spilled blood. In the summer, the so-called white nights in St. Petersburg, the sun stays out until well after midnight. You can read a newspaper at midnight out on the town square if you'd like. And this is St. Petersburg in the winter when it gets down to minus 30 degrees Celsius. And this is the St. Isaac's Cathedral, one of the most beautiful cathedrals, I think, in the world. And living and working in Russia was really interesting because it gave me the chance to immerse myself in the Russian language as well as in the Russian culture. And Russians are very, very proud of their culture. And so one of the easiest ways to kind of win them over and win their confidence is to show the same respect for their culture that they have for it. And so I really enjoyed that, getting to learn Russian literature, as well as studying the arts in St. Petersburg. Fantastic opportunity. So from St. Petersburg, I was then transferred back to Germany. So you remember that I started my career in Frankfurt. And from 2012 to 15, I was stationed in Dusseldorf, Germany, the capital of North Rhine-Westphalia, which is Germany's largest and most wealthiest state. And I was the consul general in Dusseldorf, essentially representing America and doing a lot of public outreach and explaining the policies of the administration at that time. We were particularly focused on trade and investment issues, and so I spent a lot of time doing that. And luckily, I got to do that in German, so that helped me to improve my German language skills. The first few times I did that in German, I was terrified. I was worried about making mistakes. And then I realized that the Germans didn't really care, that they knew I was going to make mistakes. because I was a non-native speaker, and so it got a lot more comfortable for me. But this is one of the things you'll do in the Foreign Service is use your language skills to go out and do effective public diplomacy. So from Dusseldorf, I figured, I needed a warmer change in climate. So I headed off to Baghdad, Iraq for a year from 2015 to 16, where I was the senior humanitarian coordinator at our US Embassy there. Again, working with Iraqi internally displaced persons and ensuring that we were providing assistance to them, about 3.5 million Iraqi IDPs, and then also about 250,000 Syrian refugees in the north. So I got to travel to Kurdistan in the north quite a bit to visit IDP and refugee camps. In Baghdad, travel was a little bit more restricted. After that tour, I did my final overseas tour in Vienna, Austria, the picture at the bottom right. That was a 3-year tour where I was the counselor for political and economic affairs, doing a lot of political and economic analysis there, but also for about a year and a half, the acting deputy ambassador, what we call deputy chief of mission. So that was an interesting exercise in embassy management, but also I got to do the work that I really love, which is political work. So that's kind of a typical range of countries that you would do in a foreign service career, let's say 20 to 30 years. So I'm going to quickly run through the categories of jobs that we have available in the Foreign Service. These 5 here I've talked about briefly. They're called generalist positions: the consular, management, public diplomacy, economic, and political. Consular officers, again, do the consular work, the visa work, as well as American citizen services. Management officers oversee the logistics package that we use to support diplomacy abroad at our embassies. Public diplomacy officers tell America's story. They manage relations with the press. They oversee our exchange programs, bringing foreign students to the US and vice versa. And they also bring expert speakers from the US to the countries to which they're assigned, who will then talk about current issues in America. So they could cover the elections, for example, this year, race relations in America, environmental issues in America, and so forth. Economic and political officers, we're kind of 2 sides of the same coin. We're watching political and economic developments in the country, figuring out what they mean, what those developments might mean for American interests, and then what we should do to counter those developments or to adapt to those developments. So again, those are the 5 categories in the generalist ranks. Specialists, there are about a dozen or more specialist categories, but the ones we're recruiting for right now the most intensively are in the information management field. So we're looking for IT folks to oversee our classified and unclassified IT systems. Facilities managers to make sure the buildings are actually operational. If you're in Baghdad in the summer, you want to make sure that your HVAC systems are in good working order, as well as the air filtration systems there. Construction engineers actually build our embassies. At any given time, there are probably half a dozen to a dozen embassies that are under construction around the world. We have 270 diplomatic missions worldwide. So we've got a lot of construction engineers out there overseeing the teams that are doing the construction. Diplomatic security agents oversee the security programs at our embassies. They ensure security of life, information, as well as property. And while they're in the United States, they're doing investigations into visa fraud, and they're also providing security for dignitaries and sometimes serve on the Secretary's security detail. Medical staff, we're looking for medical providers, family nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, general practitioners, and psychiatrists, as well as laboratory techs. So we're recruiting in all of these fields. There are generally openings in every one of these fields at practically any given time during the year. So if folks are interested in these, they can take a look at our website. I'll show it to you again at the very end and take a look at applying. Civil service personnel are those who staff the State Department. They're kind of the backbone of the State Department, the experts. They develop deep expertise in particular fields. They can be policy analysts. They can be logistics experts who are supporting our embassies abroad. And to apply for those jobs, you would go to usaidjobs.gov, and we'll see that in just a moment. So closing out, I want to just highlight again careers.state.gov. What are the pathways into a foreign service career? One of the things you can do immediately to sort of enhance your ability to compete very effectively or successfully for a foreign service job would be to do a student internship with us. We have unpaid internships. They are 10 weeks each. We offer them 3 times a year. in the spring, summer, and the fall. And we are hoping to do actual in-person internships in the fall. We haven't quite decided yet, but we're looking forward to hopefully doing those in person. And then we're opening up for the spring 2021, and then we'll be opening later this year for summer 2021. We do have some paid internships. These are highly competitive. The U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program, that's a 2-year program, and the Pathways Program, which is paid but for civil service. We then have some very, very lucrative fellowships, the Wrangell and Pickering Fellowships. I know Josh is going to talk in more detail about those. These will each provide about $37,500 a year towards graduate schools, towards a master's degree in a field related to the Foreign Service. So public administration, international relations, political science, economics, and so forth. There are 2 internships that are attached to these fellowships. So you would do 2 10-week internships for each. The one for Wrangell, the first one for Wrangell would be in Washington on the Hill. The second one for Wrangell would be at an embassy overseas. For Pickering, you would do one in Washington at the State Department. The second one, again, at an embassy overseas. We also have the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship, which is for IT students, and that would pay for your last 2 years of undergraduate or a 2-year master's degree in IT with the same, pretty much the same conditions as the Wrangell and Pickering Fellowship. Consular Fellows, that is a limited 5-year appointment for those who speak fluent Portuguese, Spanish, Mandarin, Chinese, or Arabic. So if you're fluent in any of those languages, you might consider a tour as a consular fellow. Again, it's a 5-year tour. You would be doing consular work, primarily visa interviews, but also some American citizen services, and then working in other sections of the embassy. And then many of our consular fellows end up taking the Foreign Service Officer test at the end of their fellowship period, and then entering as regular Foreign Service officers. The Foreign Service Officer test is offered 3 times a year. We just did, actually, the one that was supposed to be in June, we're doing in July. And then that's followed by an oral assessment that you would take. If you pass both of those procedures, you then move on to being invited to join the Foreign Service as an entry-level officer. And then usajobs.gov for civil service positions. Our hiring goals right now: diversity hiring, again, in all of its various capacities or the various definitions. Specialists, we're looking at the specialists that I alluded to earlier, IT, facilities managers, and so forth. Also veterans hiring. So we're really looking for veterans to join the Foreign Service as well. If you'd like to get in touch with me directly, here is my email address, hublersa@state.gov. Happy to talk to any of you directly, set up one-on-one advising sessions. I've been doing that for the past couple of months, and it works out pretty well. So just email me and I'll set that up. And now I'm going to shut up and let James take over.
Thanks, Steve. I think we did this, as Steve mentioned, we did a session at Florida State last year. And for me, this approach works where State Department, Steve as State Department representative, goes first. They're cabinet level agency, they're bigger, they have a bigger presence around the world. We're a more focused agency at USAID, but also it works because I don't have to do a slide presentation, and I can piggyback on a lot of what Steve said. Before I get started, I also want to, mentioning that session last summer, last August, I want to thank Josh Stanek for the opportunity. I think Steve will agree that the opportunities that work best for us, where I feel we have the most impact in our work as diplomats in residence, I'm a development diplomat in residence, are when we're partnered with someone like Josh, who's at a university, who is focused on making sure you are all aware of opportunities, not making decisions for you, not pushing you in any direction, but making sure that you're aware of what's out there and what's available to you, so that you can make informed decisions and you can find what's a good fit for you and pursue those opportunities. And so thanks to Josh for this opportunity. Thanks for last year for creating a platform where State and USAID can reach Florida State students and alums, as it were, and make you aware of what's available to you in the event that a career in foreign affairs, careers in international public service, a career potentially in the Foreign Service is what you think is right for you. Also, I'd like to mention my replacement is here, Alexius Butler, who is the new USAID Development Diplomat in Residence for the South. So like I've done for the last few years, she's going to be based in Atlanta at Morehouse College. She'll be covering Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. I will say I'm going to talk a little bit about our Donald M. Payne Fellowship Program. And if Josh hasn't told you already, we've had more Payne Fellows from Florida State than any other school across the country. It's a national program. So hopefully some of you are going to help FSU stay in the lead on that front. I'm, as Steve, a Foreign Service Officer. USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, is one of a few agencies in the federal government who have foreign service officers. State Department, obviously, USAID, the Commerce Department has their Foreign Commercial Service, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture has their Foreign Agriculture Service. Now, there are other agencies that have a presence and work overseas. I've worked in 6 countries. My first overseas post was in Budapest, Hungary. Soon after Steve helped take the wall down, I was in Budapest working to help that country and that region through the transition from the Soviet era. Then I went back to DC for a few years and worked on civil society programs, and I was a liaison to the State Department on Kosovo. So I was part of the first team from USAID to go to Kosovo in 1998 to do an assessment to understand what the possibilities were for establishing some presence there in conjunction, obviously, with the State Department, but to begin an assistance program to Kosovo. This is before the air campaigns, the NATO air campaigns in '98, but we did eventually establish a presence there and a mission there. After that, I went to the Republic of Georgia, served for about 2 years in Tbilisi, Georgia, in the Economic Growth Office. I went from there to Mozambique. And for me, that's one of the special things about being in the Foreign Service, as you heard from Steve's experience in the countries and places he served, to go from a country like Georgia, which is about the size of South Carolina, 4 to 5 million people. They have a language that's only spoken in that region. They have an original alphabet, so it's not a language or an alphabet that's related to any other. It's a former Soviet republic. So going from there to Mozambique, which is twice the size of California, former Portuguese colony, so Portuguese speaking, one of the poorest countries in Africa at the time. And in both places, having the opportunity and being expected to figure out how to contribute to successful projects and successful transition and progress in those countries, development progress. To me, that's what I've loved about my career, is that I knew, I didn't always know where I was going next, but I knew I was going to be challenged. I knew I was going to have support and resources. Part of that support comes from the embassy, where you have a regional security officer who's helping you understand how to be safe and how to keep your family safe. You have a health unit, which is helping, which is there to sort of advise you on how to stay healthy in these different places. You have different sections. You have a housing unit, which is provides your housing for you, and it's housing that's secure and meets certain standards that the State Department and our agencies have decided we should be provided, given the sacrifices we're making in going halfway around the world to work on all of your behalf. From Mozambique, I went to South Africa, so drove across the border and settled in there for a few years. And that was a regional office, so we were actually providing services and running programs around in several countries in Southern Africa. After that, I went to the Dominican Republic. Just so you know, as Steve mentioned, language is an essential aspect of being in the Foreign Service. You have to meet a language requirement. And when you meet that requirement, if you need to learn other languages or shore up your language skills, then you will be given opportunities to do that with language training, formal language training. I came into the agency, I was an international relations major undergrad. I minored in Spanish, so I had some Spanish. I was given language training to meet the requirement in Spanish. And of course, then they sent me to Hungary. I did get language training in the office in Hungary, but I didn't get to use my Spanish until I got to the Dominican Republic in the end of 2008, 2009. So I was there for 3.5 years as the deputy mission director and then the acting director. And then 5 years before coming here, from 2012 to 2017, we spent in Honduras. So I went there as a USAID director in Honduras. Just a little background is when we were assigned to Honduras in 2012, and I went with my wife and our 2 kids. I think our daughter was 11 at the time, and our son was 10 and 6. It was the homicide capital of the world. So for any place that wasn't at war, it had the highest homicide rate of any country that wasn't at war. And so, but I got to take my family there, and we ended up staying a 5th year because the work was really rewarding. We were making a difference there. It was a great situation for my family. We all loved it there. And it was, for me, the best mission I worked in. And so just an example of the kind of challenges we face and what they might look like on the surface, but being in those situations and working with people in their countries, in their environments, on their biggest challenges, it's just for me, a very rewarding job. And so I know you'll have Alexius going forward as your USAID diplomat in residence. She served in different places and more challenging places. So she did in different roles at times. So you have an opportunity to hear from her as well and talk to her about her experience and her perspective on this career. Sort of following on to some of Steve's points, I think for me the biggest draw, the biggest draws for staying in this career, a lot of what I think I share with my USAID colleagues and why we want to work in USAID and why we stay in USAID is that I think most of us are inspired by what the agency is set up to do. So the agency was established in 1961. We're the US government's lead development agency. So we manage most of the US government's foreign assistance. We have a presence in about 85 countries. We have programs in over 100 countries. And in each country, the six countries I've worked in, every place I'm part of the embassy. We all report to the ambassador and fall under the ambassador's authority. And as Steve described in a few of his assignments, every place I've been, I've been fortunate to work with my State Department colleagues. I sometimes characterize it, and Steve and Alexis, and I know Steve's replacement CB is on as well, might describe it a little differently. For me, I feel like State Department primarily creates the context and the environment for us, for an agency like USAID, to go in and work with our host country counterparts, with people in that country, again, on their biggest challenges, their biggest issues. So we get to work a little bit more outside of the office. We get to work a little more directly with our beneficiaries and stakeholders from that country. But we're doing it in the context and in support of US policy interests, US national interests, and we're doing it in close partnership with our state colleagues. So that's, to me, one of the highlights of the job. We get to work with other public servants from across the US government, whether it's State Department, Department of Justice, DHS, Department of Defense, Department of Labor, who are all, again, committed public servants who are there in support of US interests and US policies, and who are trying to make a difference in the US government and in our country's relations with any particular country that we're in. We do have, Steve mentioned, we also have internship programs. We have a fellowship program, which I'll spend some time on today. We have paid and unpaid internships. Even this year with the challenges of COVID, and I'm teleworking now, we're all teleworking. Even our colleagues from overseas are teleworking. We still are able to conduct our paid internship program. So we're still going to have paid internships this year. And so I would expect next year we'll continue with that. I don't know, did you mention virtual student federal service?
I didn't, but that's a
Yeah.
good one to mention. Yeah.
So great program. It's called the Virtual Student Federal Service. It's a program that's the State Department manages, but around 54, 55 other agencies participate. And you can go to the site. I think you can find a link on careers.state.gov. And it's VSFS, Virtual Student Federal Service. It's an internship program that's virtual. You don't have to leave. You can work from home, and it wasn't created because of COVID. It existed well before that. And it's an opportunity to get real work experience, to work on a project with some part of the US government. USAID has projects in the pipeline. When I was in Honduras, we worked with 2 graduate students who did research for us, did a desk survey for us on gender-based violence, because we didn't have the bandwidth to do enough research to learn about that issue. And so we had 2 students stateside who did that work for us, and we got really excellent quality work. And they got real work experience. So I encourage you to look at that opportunity. There's an organization called the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, HACU, HACU.net. They have a student internship program with the federal government as well. But for us, if you're interested in the Foreign Service, and the primary, one of the best ways to get into Foreign Service, particularly if you don't yet have a graduate degree, is the Donald M. Payne Fellowship Program. And so similar to the Pickering and Rangel programs, there's a process, and Steve, you want to talk about those a little later, or what were you thinking?
I think Josh is going to go into a little bit more detail on that. So,
all right. So that's a great path, but also we've just this year started back to hiring into our Foreign Service. So as Steve mentioned, USAjobs.gov, all of our openings are listed there, including our Foreign Service opportunities. Even if you have to have a graduate degree to be eligible. So if you don't have a degree yet, it can't hurt to go and look at what the requirements are for those positions to get an idea of what it's going to take. But beyond that, to also get a good sense, I think, of what it takes to be competitive for opportunities to join USAID's Foreign Service, I encourage you to go to the Payne Fellowship website. It's Payne Fellows, P-A-Y-N-E. I can share the screen, I think. Can you guys see my screen?
nope.
No, let me. All right, there we go. Wow. Okay, I don't know how to do this, so sorry. Alexis will know how to share her screen. Oh, thank you, Josh.
There you go.
So this is the Payne Fellowship website. A couple of things I encourage you to do. Go to the profiles for the fellows and read about their backgrounds and how they got to being competitive and selected for the fellowship. I tell folks that these are individuals who were not selected just for a fellowship. They were selected, like I think the Rangel and Pickering fellows are, because they demonstrated the potential to be successful Foreign Service officers. And so when you look at their backgrounds, you'll get a sense of the kind of people we're looking for. Most of them have some international experience, even if that's just study abroad, or some of them have been Peace Corps volunteers. They have some other language skills and have demonstrated the capacity to learn a foreign language. So I encourage you to look at their, not as a blueprint, but just to get an idea of the kinds of things you might want to do if you think you want to end up in USAID's Foreign Service. And then the other link under the graduate fellowship programs is the description of U.S. Foreign Service officer positions. Those descriptions, they're short, short paragraph, a few bullets roughly on each one, give you an idea about, Steve mentioned the economic officers and political officers are different cones of State Department. These, we call them backstops, but these are the positions that we have for our Foreign Service officers. So undergraduate, we're not looking for particular majors. We do want folks to have some more focus as in their graduate degrees, but these are the kinds of things that you can expect to do if you have an interest in education, want to work on education issues, if you have an interest in public health or the environment or agriculture or, as an economist. or democracy and governance, or crisis and stabilization, crisis resolution. There are a range of opportunities for you, and all of these now are, in addition to the Payne Fellowship being a path to these careers, we're also, again, advertising vacancies for these opportunities. So the last point I think I'll make before we get to some of the questions, I know some of you posted questions. The two things that really have kept me in this career, one, and this is from day one in my overseas assignment in Hungary and every place I've been since, and that's, I know that the work I do can make a difference in someone's lives and have some impact on people's lives, on communities in the countries we're in. And we're a bureaucracy, we push paper to take actions and to justify decisions and to implement programs. But as a bureaucracy, the work we do can make a difference for people. So I'm not saying we always get it right, but work someplace where you have that opportunity and you have the mandate and you get the resource and support and systems to make a difference. That's what's kept me, one of the things that's kept me in this job. And the other thing is that every place we go, every place I've worked, I've been able to work on issues that are bigger than me. Whether if it was poverty and HIV/AIDS in Mozambique, or anti-corruption in Georgia, or violence prevention, as I mentioned, in Honduras, I got to work with Hondurans on some of their biggest challenges, violence prevention and poverty reduction. And that, to me, is a great opportunity in a career, and something that I've wanted in a career and I've been able to have in USAID. So I'll leave it at that, and maybe we can get some of the questions and keep this moving. But thank you guys for joining us and for this opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, James. We have a lot of questions. They came in almost as soon as you started talking, so here we go. So William Moscone asked, would you recommend military service as a good way to begin a career in foreign service?
Having done a brief military career before I entered the Foreign Service, I would say it's a good pathway. It's one of several. Other good pathways are Peace Corps, doing the Peace Corps, but military service is going to give you some of the discipline, some of the focus on mission, some of the communication skills, as well as the leadership experience that certainly helped me, I think, when I came into the Foreign Service. I had taken the Foreign Service test twice before trying it my third time after my military service. The first two times I came close, but was not quite there. So the third time was the trick, and I think my military service really helped give me a boost.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can't hurt. Steve said you get training and you including leadership training. And so I think a number of colleagues have had military experience in USAID as well. And it certainly, and working with our DoD colleagues, you see the value of the investment that the Department of Defense makes in training and leadership development. So certainly can't hurt.
The next question we have here actually is about the service exams. So they said that they've heard there's a lot of difficulty related to taking the exams, and there are not many ways to prepare for it. What's your opinion on that, and do you agree with the sentiment? Also, side note, and this one's specific to Stephen, you did your country a service by walking away from the shrimp.
Thank you. Well, thanks for that. I also wanted to just, first, I want to give a quick shout out to CB Tony, who's on this call. He's actually in Peshawar, Pakistan. He's the consul general there, and he's going to be my successor. And he is serving in probably what is the toughest foreign service assignment, worldwide today. So a big shout out to him for that. In terms of the difficulty of the foreign service exam, it is definitely difficult. The pass rate overall from start to finish is about 3%. So of those who apply to take the foreign service exam, then pass the written and the oral, it's about 3%. It doesn't mean it's not doable. So I was not a Rhodes Scholar. I was not the smartest kid in my class in any of my university courses. But I think there's a lot to be said for persistence. Stick to it. If this is a career that you want, work for it. You can prepare through a variety of ways. There are some Facebook sites that you can use. There is an FSOT preparation guide that you can buy. We don't endorse it one way or the other. I also recommend reading The Economist magazine faithfully, every issue that comes out, front to cover to back, because it contains a wealth of information and the kinds of stuff that you need to know for the Foreign Service Officer test. There was also a question about physical disabilities. We are hiring people with physical disabilities as well. So we do make allowances for Schedule A candidates, and we do have a really great program, and it's something I'm really proud of in the Foreign Service, is we have great programs for accommodation for physically disabled persons. So I was in Baghdad with a woman who was wheelchair bound. She actually worked for USAID, a great colleague, and all of us worked to make it work for her. And she was really a great asset to the team. So yes, absolutely, absolutely. We are looking for those candidates as well.
So just quickly on both, two opposite answers on that question. So we don't require the Foreign Service exam for USAID's Foreign Service. I think, again, if you look at the backgrounds of folks who have entered into our paying fellowship, you will see it's very competitive and still very rigorous. So it's not to suggest any lower standard in terms of what we're looking for and what the quality of individual we're looking for, but it's just not a requirement to enter into USAID's Foreign Service. The work is different, significantly different, but complementary, as we discussed earlier. And then on the accommodations for individuals with disabilities, exactly the same. We're required by law, but I believe we have institutional cultures that are supportive of creating environments where anyone can be successful. And the other benefit of having that culture is we're able to carry those messages through our relations with the countries where we work as well, and promoting programs and initiatives that benefit and create access and opportunities for folks who have been too often left out.
Thank you for catching that question we skipped. Let's see, next one is, did you have a chance to pick or have your choice taken into account when moving to different countries or jobs?
So for the State Department, the answer is yes, you play a role in that. For your first two tours, which are 2 years each, so for me it was Frankfurt and Costa Rica, I submitted a list to my career development officer, and then my career development officer picked the country from that list that she thought I was best suited for. So I had the German language, so I went to Frankfurt, and then she decided that I needed some geographic experience as well, so I went to Costa Rica. Those are called directed assignments. So you pick from a list of, you put together a list of about 10 choices, and then your career development officer directs you to that assignment. After that, you are selecting the assignments that you would like, and you are competing with other Foreign Service officers for those assignments. So, for example, when I was competing for the position in Dusseldorf as Consul General, I had about 22 or 23 colleagues who were competing against me for that. When I was competing for the position in Baghdad, there were only 2 of us. At that point, ISIS was about 30 kilometers outside of Baghdad. And so the other candidate eventually dropped off the list, and I won the jackpot by getting that assignment. So you'll be determining to a large extent where you go in the Foreign Service. There's no guarantee, and you have to be worldwide available. So if you only want to serve in London, Paris, and Rome, you're not going to succeed in the Foreign Service. That will not work. You have to do what we call your fair share, and that also means working in places that may be unhealthy, dangerous, or not always very pleasant. So, but you know, that being said, you do have do play a key role in determining your career path.
Yeah, same for us, same process. We get to submit what's called our bid list, up to 8 places, 8 jobs that you'd like to have. And if you're scheduled to move, this is typically a year before you're scheduled to move. your job will be on that list for others to bid on as well. And I encourage folks to put jobs down that they would want to have. The good news is that if you don't get your first, second, third, fourth, or fifth or sixth choice, you're still going to have a job, right? You're not gonna be kicked out of the Foreign Service. So, and in my case, at the 6 places I've been assigned, I really only sort of went through that process and ended up with something on my bid list in one of them, and that was South Africa. I didn't bid on Mozambique, ended up going there and staying a 5th year because we loved it there. I didn't bid on Honduras. The Bureau called and asked if I wanted to go there, and talked to my wife, and we said yes, and stayed an extra year because we loved it there. So I think for me that's an important part of this experience and this career and this lifestyle and this process is being open to where you end up. Worldwide available doesn't have to be a negative thing. It certainly can be a positive thing because, again, wherever you go, there's going to be a need for the work you're doing, and there's going to be a role for you to play, and it's going to be an opportunity for you to make a difference.
Okay. Next question is, when you say you're looking for IT for information management, does having a background academically or even occupationally in network engineering help toward that area?
So the answer is yes, yes, and yes. If you have an academic background in IT, that's great. If you don't have an academic background, but you have enough years of specialized experience, generally 2 or more, then we can also look at you as a candidate. We want you to be able to troubleshoot our IT systems. We want you to understand software updates to the systems, how to work cybersecurity, so countering attacks on our systems overseas. So we're really interested in a combination of academic and specialized experience. You can have a degree that's not at all related to IT, but if you have the experience in working in the IT field, you should definitely take a look at us. So take a look at our website, careers.state.gov, go to the specialist category, and then look at our IT jobs, and you'll see whether your particular experience would match. But we're definitely looking for folks in that branch.
Okay.
Most of our IT jobs are in DC. We typically hire folks from the country we're in to manage our systems and our missions, in part because, as Steve described, the State Department has U.S. citizens who are managing systems for the embassy writ large.
And I just want to be aware, James and Steve, that you have another event after this. So please just notify me when you all to wrap up. But we'll just keep plugging through these questions until that. So does the Foreign Service have any programs offers similar to the U.S. military where they will pay for schooling in exchange for service, like medical school, for example?
So we have a couple of programs that will pay for your schooling, but not medical school, unfortunately. As I mentioned, we have the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship, so that will pay for your IT studies, either your last 2 years of undergrad or your graduate degree, if you then agree to join the Foreign Service and you have a 5-year service commitment. We also do schooling. They're generally 1-year programs at our service academies. So the War College, the Army War College, Naval War College, Air Force, and so forth. You can do 1 year. You usually get a degree in national security and strategic studies. Those programs are fully paid by the State Department. And you do it usually at a more senior level. So either at the FS2 or FS1 level. So that's the equivalent of a lieutenant colonel or a full colonel in the military. We also have some programs in economics, so we'll pay for some folks to study economics at an advanced level, and then you do incur a service commitment after that. But we don't do medical school, we don't pay for law school.
Same for us. Alexius, who's replacing me, actually just completed a year at the Army War College. It's a great program. I think it's another way of gaining really valuable insight into the quality of leadership in the Department of Defense and other agencies, because we do have, as Steve said, state colleagues and other agencies there as well. Our fellowship program is the primary way to pay for a graduate degree and with the path into the agency, into the Foreign Service. But professional development, both in technical skills, as well as in management and leadership and agency operations, is ongoing, and in leadership, and is provided throughout your career. So language training as well, of course.
So the next question is a build up off of the question about choosing location. They wanted to ask about if your preferences are taken into account regarding length of your time in a location, as well as the theme of your engagement at that location.
So in terms of the length for the State Department, most tours are either 2 years or 3 years. In certain countries that are sort of tougher, you'll do a 2-year tour. In most European countries, it's generally 3 years. It used to be the case that you could extend for a 4th year in some of the European countries. That is no longer the case. I was lucky to extend in Macedonia from 2004 to 2008, but only because I had worked on this particular problem set for so long, and my ambassador wanted me to try to wrap up as Macedonia neared its NATO membership goals. In the countries where you serve for 2 years, you can extend for a 3rd year. So when I was in Ethiopia, I could have done a 3rd year, but I thought the travel had sort of gotten to me after a while, taking malaria medication. And so I was ready to move to another posting. In places like Baghdad or Kabul or Peshawar, where CB is stationed, it's generally a 1-year tour. I'm not sure if in CB's case that's correct, but for me in Baghdad, it was a 1-year tour, and then I could have extended by a year.
USAID, we typically do 4 years, so it's 2-year tours. After 2 years, you get what's called home leave, where you get paid vacation, a minimum of 20 days of paid vacation back in the States, and you have to do that every 2 years, and you have to do it in the States. But if in our countries that we call critical priority countries like Afghanistan, South Sudan, Iraq, it's only a 1 year that's required. Those are unaccompanied posts, so you can't go with the family. There are opportunities if you have a spouse who can find it and the job's available for them there where that could happen, but I think that's kind of rare for us. And then there are places that are considered sort of hardship posts where you're only expected to do 2 years, a 1-year tour, or a 1 tour, so 2 years. But even those, like Alexis served in Haiti and in South Sudan, and she only had to do a year in South Sudan. But in Haiti, I'm pretty sure she did 4 years because a lot of folks end up staying for a second tour. Again, given the opportunities you have with the kind of work we do.
The next question is about personal life, and it's how have you balanced your family life together with your career? What is the process of bringing a spouse with you on placement, especially if the spouse is, if a spouse into a U.S. citizen, I believe is a U.S. citizen is probably what they meant?
Or isn't, I think isn't a U.S. citizen.
Isn't is probably.
So it's possible to balance life in the Foreign Service. I've done it for the last 30 plus years with my wife and our 2 kids. It's not always easy. I think it's easier for the officer to make the transition than it is for the family often, because we have an automatic network at work. When we're at the embassy, there's sort of a support group there in terms of all your other colleagues. But for the spouses, we do try to provide work opportunities. So within embassies, my wife has worked in the housing office as a housing coordinator, managing the teams that prepared housing for the new folks coming in Ethiopia, about 40 families every summer. And then she worked in the visa section doing congressional correspondence in Macedonia, did a similar thing in St. Petersburg. So she's had that opportunity. The kids receive a great education. They're educated in international schools primarily. Our oldest daughter graduated from the Anglo-American school in St. Petersburg in Russia in a class of 8 in her high school, 8 seniors. And then our younger daughter graduated from the American International School in Vienna, Austria, where she graduated with a class of a more normal size, like about 40, 45 students. So you can balance your life. The work is demanding. I think James will agree that the hours are not 9 to 5. It's not a 9 to 5 job. And if you enter the State Department believing that you can have that sort of a schedule, you might luck out in 1 or 2 posts, but primarily it's a very demanding challenge to manage all the work you have to do within the parameters of the 9 to 5 framework. So 12-hour days were not uncommon in Macedonia, in particular when we were running into crisis periods, when we would have one of the political parties all of a sudden threatening to go back up into the hills and take up arms against the government. If that happened late on a Friday afternoon or even in the evening, we often spent the entire weekend working to get people back into line and bring them back to the negotiating table. So that's a little bit difficult, but you can certainly strive for good work-life balance, and that comes through the ability to explore the country, learn the language, and immerse yourself in the culture.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I think for us, what's worked, and in my case, my wife has a green card now, but for most of our time, we've been married, I think, 19 years now, 19 years in September. She was not an American citizen, and that wasn't an issue. At times, it could have been an issue in terms of working on the local economy, et cetera, depending on where we are. South Africa, for example, it's very difficult to get work permits if you're a foreigner in someplace like South Africa. But I think what's worked for us is, I assume this is similar with Steve and others, is a commitment to the lifestyle, is an acknowledgement that, there are times when you're going to be leaving and you don't know where you're going to go. There are times when you end up going someplace. Our first assignment together was Mozambique. Neither one of us had been to Southern Africa before. The only place I'd been in Africa at that point was in Cairo. And so it was far from home for both of us. My wife actually, most of our staff are people from the countries where we work. And my wife worked in USAID in the Republic of Georgia. She's Georgian. And so taking a Georgian to Mozambique, we got married in South Africa after we got there, was not a sort of natural thing that happens, I think. Our kids, before we moved here to Atlanta, we was moving here in 2017. Our daughter was 15 when we got here. Our son was 11. Our first time living in the States as a family. They had never gone to school in the States. They had never gone to public schools. They went to the kinds of schools that Steve described, the international schools. Fortunately, your schooling is paid for when you're overseas, K through 12. And so, they had to adapt to life in America. They're Americans. They were both born in DC, but they did have to adapt, and I think they did pretty well. But I think what's worked for us is a commitment to the lifestyle, and understanding that it's not routine, it's not predictable. We didn't plan to go to the homicide capital of the world. We didn't know if we'd like it or not, but we all loved it. And so I think if you're committed to the lifestyle and you can adapt and go with the flow when things don't go the way you expected, and I think they rarely do, that it's a lifestyle that you can make work and enjoy. You can enjoy the unexpected. You can enjoy, going to northern Mozambique. When are you ever going to get the chance to go to northern Mozambique or parts of Honduras that people feel it's not safe to go to, or western Georgia. So it's there are lots of pluses for me. The pluses far outweigh the negatives, and it's something that, again, if as a couple and as a family you're committed to the lifestyle, it can work.
Okay, so just an awareness of time, like I want to say, Stephen and James, I will push you all out very soon. I will just ask one more question, and for those of you whose questions we did not get to, just know that well, Stephen provided his email address. I will say that Stephen and James are both going to be changing posts soon, as they've suggested, but we will have their replacements who are actually in this meeting who have been listening to this. So if you do have questions that didn't get answered today, please just email me. I'll be happy to facilitate the conversations that you need to have with our diplomats and residents. So last question, I'll sort of pair it with another one. What are the internal educational training opportunities to prepare you for your various placements, and how much time is usually given to prepare?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in addition to language training, which can range again anywhere from 4 to 6 months to 10 months to 2 full years for a language like Arabic or Mandarin Chinese, we also do have functional training. So I received, before going to Frankfurt, I had a week of training in political tradecraft. I've done the 3-week course in economic tradecraft at the Foreign Service Institute. I've done training in humanitarian affairs, in democracy and human rights, in security. So one of the greatest training courses that we have is called the Crash and Bang course. It's a course that's held out at a racetrack. I think it's still in West Virginia. You basically go through a simulation of serving in a country that's at war. You familiarize yourself with the different types of weapons, with explosives. You're not actually using them, but you're seeing what they can do. And you get to drive a car through a barricade and smash another car and get it out of the way, so that you learn how to do that if you're ever in a situation like that, let's say in a place like Baghdad. You also go through a simulation where you are in an embassy, in a mock embassy that has been attacked, and it's filled with smoke, and you're crawling on the ground, and you are trying to follow the person in front of you to get yourself out of that situation. So while the training is, it's kind of enjoyable, it's kind of fun, it's also deadly serious, because it will train you to survive in those types of situations if you end up in that. So the training is excellent. I have had probably, out of the 29 years I've been in the Foreign Service, I would say between 3 and 4 years have been spent doing some kind of training, including language.
Yeah, we offer all kinds, as I mentioned earlier, training to build and enhance our professional skills, both as managers. So on USAID systems, on leadership, one of the best courses I ever did was a 2-week course on leadership at the Federal Executive Institute in Charlottesville. But we do the Crash and Bang course as well. When I was in Honduras, we helped the agency pilot a personal recovery course, which was, taught some more advanced first aid, but also some orienteering. We learned, how to, if you get your wrist duct taped, how to escape from that sort of situation, how to handle a situation where you might be either lost or even kidnapped. And just 2 quick points. One, it's great to have that knowledge and awareness if you need it. And fortunately, I haven't needed it, and none of my colleagues in Honduras have needed it. But the other thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, at every embassy there's a regional security officer, so a diplomatic security officer who's responsible for security across the embassy community. We served in South Africa when it was a critical crime post where violence and crime was an everyday thing and real risk. And we served again in Honduras when it had the highest homicide rate in the world. I am convinced that in both places, my family and myself remain safe because we followed the guidance of the security office. So they, we do things like when you pull up to your gate that has a sliding gate in South Africa, you don't pull in and wait. You stay on the street as the gate opens, and then when it opens, you drive in. So you can't get blocked in, sort of thing. And so using your alarm. And so there are people that are part of the community you're working in who are experts and professionals and skilled at helping you have a safe time in country. And I think for me, it certainly worked. Listening to that guidance has definitely made a difference.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate both of you taking time to talk with FSU students and alumni. If I know applause is a little bit more challenging, but I think we can use the reactions. If anyone wants to try using the reactions to applaud, that'd be great.
Hey, what are all those thumbs downs? I don't like those thumbs down.
You can wait till we sign off to.
Hey, thanks a lot, Josh. Thanks to you and to all the students. It really is always great to talk with our FSU colleagues. And I wish you all a great, great summer, great success. And I hope to see you in State Magazine as new Foreign Service officers.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Josh. Congratulations to all of you for making it to and ideally through FSU. I enjoy doing these sessions in part because I get to connect with a Foreign Service colleague like Steve. And he is a great representative of what the Foreign Service officers and who we have in the Foreign Service. So it's an honor, Steve, to get this last chance. We'll do one more today, but it's an honor to do this with you. Hopefully you guys leave with a good impression. And I think it's an accurate impression of what the Foreign Service can offer. Thanks, Nirvana, for that.
Thanks for that, James. Thanks, everyone.
All right, see you guys. Stay healthy.
And for those of you who are still here, stick around. I'm going to go over fellowships.
See you soon, James.
Will help you get to a career in the Foreign Service if that's something you're interested in. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. And we'll make this really quick. And if you have questions specific to me, I'd be happy to answer them. So for those of you who don't know, whether you're a student or an FSU alumni, my office, the Office of National Fellowships, helps students to apply for nationally competitive scholarships and fellowships. These things can fund graduate school, they can fund internship opportunities, they can fund skill building opportunities. And so we work very closely with students to just help you find fellowships that fit your interest, as well as help you with the application process. So I usually spend somewhere around 2 months working with students on their applications to help them put together the most competitive application they can. So these are my colleagues listed there. There's gonna be some contact information at the end. And so feel free to write that down when you see it. You'll also be getting an email from me after this presentation with a link to this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see it there. For those of you who are juniors, I'm just going to show you all 4 or 5 fellowships that sort of directly relate to being Foreign Service officer. And this one is a good one to start with because it is a very traditional fellowship. It funds an experience where you and similar people with similar interests come together to focus on that topic of interest for a period of time, in this case, 7 weeks. And so this one's about public policy and international affairs. They are held every summer at these locations. We actually had 2 students who received the fellowships this year, one to go to, we're gonna use that word loosely this year, to participate in the Carnegie Mellon University Junior Summer Institute, and we have one who is participating in the University of California, Berkeley Summer Institute. And so those are both occurring remotely this cycle. And so the idea here is that they introduce you to the variety of careers that exist in the field of public policy and international affairs, while also giving you the skill set to prepare for college. You actually take graduate level courses. You take 2 graduate level courses with your cohort while you're here. So just to introduce you to the level of coursework you would be doing if you're looking for a career in the Foreign Service. They also, I'm sorry, let me clarify that, because you're not required a master's degree for Department of State Foreign Service. But if you are planning on going to graduate school, this will help prepare you for that sort of graduate school. Also, PPIA, if you participate in their summer program, you actually get funding for graduate school when the time comes. These applications are typically due November 1st. They'll probably be opening very soon. They are not open yet, though. So keep an eye out if you're interested in this. If that program sounded like a really good fit, but maybe you're a sophomore, or you're going into your sophomore year, or you're going into your senior year, and so you're like, well, I missed my window for that this Rangel Summer Enrichment Program is essentially built exactly the same. It just takes place at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And so, as you can imagine, introducing you to careers in foreign service or in international affairs, rather, is actually quite easy to do when you're in DC, because there are plenty of people who can come and guest speak to you all. Well, also you can go and take tours and field trips of the Department of State, the Institute of International Peace, and organizations like that. These are usually due beginning of February every year, and the application usually becomes available at the beginning of January. As it says, you take 3 classes, and it's the same deal. It's a small cohort. Other people who are participating in this program. It's a funded experience to introduce you to the variety of careers and prepare you for the careers in international affairs, including foreign service. So these 2 fellowships were mentioned a few times during the presentation. You might recognize Rangel, because I was just talking about the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program. This is the graduate fellowship. So the Pickering Fellowship and the Rangel Graduate Fellowship both fund graduate school for people who want to be specifically U.S. Foreign Service officers, U.S. Department of State Foreign Service officers. So people who want to work in the same position as Steve Hubler. You can be an alumni of a university, or you can be a senior at the earliest when you apply. It funds, not only does it fund 2 years of a master's degree in the U.S., it also funds 2 internships, one in the U.S. In D.C., and the other one actually at a U.S. embassy abroad. So you get training for a summer, 10-week summer training in your field. These are due at September. This application should open any day now for Pickering and Rangel. And basically, you get to pick where you want to study the master's degree, as long as it's regionally accredited in the United States. But this is a really great program for people who want to be foreign service officers in the Department of State. Similarly, there is a extremely similar program called the Payne International Development Fellowship. This one, James Watson talked about extensively. It's built exactly the same as Pickering and Rangel, which, by the way, Pickering and Rangel, they have 2 different names because they have 2 different funding sources, but essentially they do exactly the same thing. And the funding's the same, and the application's the same, and the applications are pretty much the same as Payne. And so if you're going to apply to Pickering, I'm going to say, hey, you should also apply for Rangel, because all you have to do is submit all of the exact same information, including the same essay, to be considered for both of them. And there's no reason why you shouldn't do that. And if you're open to USAID Foreign Service or Department of State Foreign Service, then I would say also apply for Payne. Because the application is exactly the same. The essay question is different in one sense. Instead of saying, tell us why you want to be a U.S. Department of State Foreign Service officer, the Payne application says, tell us why you want to be a USAID Foreign Service officer. Otherwise, these applications are exactly the same between all 3 of them. And so same deal as well. This funds 2 years of master's degree, as well as 2 internships, one in DC and the other at a U.S. embassy working with USAID Foreign Service officers. And this application is usually due in October. It should also open any day now, so keep an eye out for that. If you, I didn't put any links to this, but if you follow us on our social media, we usually post when applications open, so keep an eye out. And tomorrow in the email that I'll send you, I'll include our links to our social media. Maybe you're interested in learning some languages. This is called the Critical Language Scholarship. It is funded by the Department of State. And so when it says critical language, this is a label that Department of State uses for languages that are important for US foreign policy, that more Americans know these languages. You won't find French, you won't find Spanish on here. You'll find languages like Azerbaijani, Hindi, you'll find Arabic, you'll find Russian, you'll find Mandarin Chinese. And I think the only Romance language that is on here is Portuguese because of Brazil, because of the importance of Brazil, and because of the importance of the Lusophone nations in Africa. This is an intensive as it says, 7 to 10 week program, usually about 2 months. So usually right at eight weeks, where the idea is that they're going to give you 2 semesters worth of language study in 2 months. And so you actually will go to a country that speaks that language. Typically, one of our 2 recipients this year were not able to do that because of COVID. But more times than not, you'll go to a country that uses that language, and so you'll often be placed with a host family as well. So in addition to your courses focusing on language learning, you'll also be living with a family who speaks that language. And the idea is that because you're immersed in the language, because you're immersed in the culture, you're able to attain a higher degree of language proficiency than you would if you were doing a similar program in the United States. These applications are typically due, as I say here, in mid-November. And so again, the application should probably be opening by the end of summer, early fall at the latest. And I will start working with anyone on these applications as soon as you're ready. In fact, if you said, hey, I'm interested in looking more into this, I'm happy to provide you with the prompts from last year's application and say, these haven't changed in X amount of years. For Pickering, Payne, Wrangell, they haven't changed since I've been started this in 2015. CLS has modified it slightly, but even if the prompts change slightly, what they're asking you to write about won't really have changed. All of these applications, no matter how they word the questions, are asking you, who are you? Who do you want to be in your future? And how does this particular experience get you one step closer to that goal? So, with CLS, why is learning Azerbaijani important to you? How does it relate to what you want to do for in graduate school or in your career? And so my job is mostly spent helping students craft the best responses to those questions that they can, basically by encouraging you to do a lot of self-reflection. And then I think this might be the last one I'm talking about. There might be one more. This is also a language scholarship, but this one is to fund year-long international experiences with the goal of immersing yourself in a language and culture that is important to you. This is not limited by languages. CLS has about, I think, 13 languages that you can choose from. The Bourne Scholarship is pretty much global. You can choose just about anywhere. They do say they're not looking for, they're not going to fund programs in Western Europe, but just about anywhere else in the world, as long as it's safe to go there, you would technically be eligible for a Bourne Scholarship to go there. And they'll give you up to $20,000 to spend 6 months or more in another country. A lot of our recipients receive it because they apply for essentially a fall spring. They find a program that exists in, where have we sent some people recently? They'll find a program that exists in, I keep on picking on Azerbaijan, in Azerbaijan that lasts a year, a fall and spring semester. And they explain why it's important to U.S. national security that we have more Americans who know this language and understand this culture. And they get chosen for funding to go and spend that fall and spring semester in that foreign country. So the Bourne Scholarship actually requires that your university do an initial review of the application. So myself and my colleagues will do that. I actually have a few faculty members that will sit down and interview you and read your application and sit down and interview you. There's no filter situation. This is not to cut people from the process. It's to essentially write a cover letter on your behalf to go with your application to the National Committee. And so that's why we have an earlier deadline that's always mid-January. And then the national deadline is usually the beginning of February. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to let you all know about. I just wanted to basically say my office exists. I will start talking to you about any of these opportunities as soon as you're interested. And I would say the sooner the better. If these fellowships don't interest you, but you're willing to explore other opportunities as well, let me know. If you tell me what your interests are, I'm happy to sit down with you and find opportunities that best fit you and what you care about. My name is Josh Stanek. As I said, I'm the Associate Director for the Office of National Fellowships. My contact information is in the center of the page. If you have no interest in talking to me, but like what I was talking about, you can contact Craig or Jesse. They would be happy to chat with you as well. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Bourne Scholarship, is that only like for language related courses that they'll give you? Or is it like courses required for your major as well as like a language course?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's both. You can at minimum you take language courses, and you have to organize that. Like everything else, all the other fellowships I talked about basically have everything set up for you. But with Bourne, it's a traditional scholarship in that it's like, here's the money, go do that thing you told us you wanted to do. And so you have to take at least language courses, but typically students will find classes that will help to complete their degree. They'll find classes that relate to that national security interest that they mentioned in their application. Yeah, great question. Anything else? I see we have a few chats here as well. Oh, and that was, can we find these slides? Yeah, so to the person who asked about where these slides will end up, yeah, I will share them in the email that I send you tomorrow. Thank you for attending this presentation. I've also been recording this presentation, and so you'll get a link to that as soon as we post it to our YouTube channel.
For the Bourne, will you have to pick a school in the other country and like register yourself, or do they help you with registration? Like, is there a list of schools that they give you? Like, how free is it for you to like go abroad with them?
Yeah. So I'm putting a link in the chat box to a website called IIE Passport. That is Institute of International Education Passport. This is a Department of State website where they have collected all of the opportunities that they're aware of study abroad for U.S. citizens. And so I generally suggest that's a great place to start looking. If you're considering certain countries, like if you're considering going to Jordan to learn Arabic, I can tell you where a lot of FSU students have gone. I happen to have that information just from my legacy in the office, but for the most part, this is a really good place to start. And I'm always happy to sort of explore opportunities with students as well. And so, yeah, great question. But I think IIE Passport's a great place to begin. I have a question. Let me make sure yeah, so one person asked, do the fellowships come with any commitment? That's an excellent question. Some of them do, some of them don't. So the Pickering Graduate Fellowship, the Wrangell Graduate Fellowship, so the ones that fund graduate school, and the Payne Graduate Fellowship, all are specific to a career, which is the Foreign Service Department of State, or in Payne's case, Foreign Service USAID. And so they all have a expectation that you're going to work 5 years for the Foreign Service. And then the Bourne Scholarship is funded by the Department of Defense, and they just say you have to work a minimum 1 year for the federal government. When you do that is a little bit flexible, basically until you complete like all of the college that you plan on doing. So if you're an undergrad, when you have the experience, you can complete your undergraduate degree. You can start graduate school. But they have a 3-year time limit once you've sort of completed the degrees you want to do. And they're pretty flexible in what qualifies as federal service, including things like Peace Corps. But PPIA, Wrangell Summer Enrichment, Critical Language Scholarship, and most fellowships I work with, frankly, which we work with 60, 70 of the same fellowships every year, but there's hundreds out there. most do not have any sort of requirements or commitment expected of you afterward. Are there any fellowships for non-US citizens? Yes, I certainly, I didn't bring those up in this presentation because this was sort of geared to people who want to be Department of State or USAID Foreign Service Officers, but I'd be happy to talk to you about that one-on-one. So if you just want to send me an email, I'd be happy to chat with you. And I know there was, my email address was on the screen, but I'll just go ahead and put it right here for anyone who wants it. And as I said, I will be sending you all an email tomorrow. Roughly when in the year for all of these scholarships do you find out if you got them or not? Okay, yes, great question. Typically spring semester. So Pickering, Payne, and Rangel, the graduate fellowships, will release decisions in the fall, toward the end of fall, usually like end of November, December. Critical Language Scholarship, which is also due in the fall but due in November, doesn't release decisions until mid-spring semester. Boren, your application isn't due until February. Their decisions don't come out usually until like 2 weeks before spring semester wraps up, so mid-April. Rangel Summer Enrichment also not due until beginning of February, and so those also tend to release decisions sort of toward the end of spring semester. PPIA, because it's due November 1st, I believe their decisions typically come out in the early spring. I'm pretty confident they do not come out in fall. I think it's usually January, February that you find out about those. And I think those are all the questions I have listed here. Does anyone have any additional questions?
Yes, sir.
How can I help you?
Well, I wanted to know, I'm disabled and I either walk around with a cane or use a wheelchair. Now, my strength is the fact that I'm quite intelligent, but my walking problems can never be fixed. Does that more or less put me in or out of being able to do this kind of a career?
Oh, well, so I would say as Stephen and James suggested, because there was a question about that in the Q&A section. They were both emphatic that would not stop you from having a career in the field.
Is there perhaps a linguist or something like that in your field? I'm getting a degree in English. I'm already learning Japanese as part of my degree.
Yeah.
But I had wanted to collect Chinese and Russian too at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of people I've met from those places.
Yeah. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question because just to be clear, I am not a Foreign Service Officer. I work at FSU as a fellowship advisor. But what I'd be happy to do is get you in touch with, if you have a preference for USAID or Department of State, I'd be happy to get in touch with one of them get you in touch with one of them, or give you both their contact information.
I would be grateful for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so tomorrow when you get my email, just respond and say, hey, can you give me their contact info? And I'd be happy to send that along to you. Any additional questions from anyone?
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to know if like the board fellowship, would that apply if I'm an international student studying at FSU Panama?
Oh, great question. So I haven't looked into citizenship requirements for Bourne. Let me see if I can find that really quickly on their eligibility page. It says that at the time of the national deadline, so the deadline that's typically in February, the applicant must be a U.S. citizen. So that would probably not be an ideal award for you.
Okay.
But I do work with fellowships that provide international experiences for international students. And so what I would say, similar to my conversation with Michael, like if you respond to the email that I send you and tomorrow just tell me like that you'd like to talk about international opportunities, then I'd be happy to follow up and like set up a one-on-one appointment with you to chat about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other?
I actually had a question. This is a little bit unrelated to the presentation, but about the Office of Fellowships. Do you guys provide help for students looking for scholarships for like general fees associated with undergraduate, like basically like paying for tuition and stuff?
So there's very few awards that we work with that are exclusively focused on like covering your tuition. There are awards that we work with that like as part of its award, you typically there's like in you know, some sort of fellowship experience of bringing people of similar interests or passions together, and then to supplement that, they may like say, we also provide $7,000 for you to continue your undergraduate education. So what I would say is that we could look into those types of fellowships where I can guarantee like, if you receive this, you get that cool experience, but also they'll help fund the remainder of your undergraduate. I can sort of rattle them off right now, but it might just be better. Same deal. If you just want to email me, respond to that email I send you, and ask me that question, I'd be happy to give you a specific response. If you could include in that email, by the way, if you could include like your field of study and your like career goals, that usually will help as well.
Thank you.
Next question. I think I have a few in the chat. Let's see. Oh yeah, so actually looks like it looks like both James Watson actually included their email address in the chat, and I see, so someone's posted Stephen Hubler's. Let me grab, I see James Watson's here. So if you want that information, again, if you email me, I can also provide it. Yeah, I think that's all I see here in the chat box. Any final questions from the audience? Huh? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for participating. It was a real pleasure chatting with you all. I hope you found the presentations from Stephen and James enlightening. And if, like I said, if you're interested in those careers, or if you're interested in seeing if there are other fellowship opportunities that might help get you to a different career, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. Just respond to the email you get from me tomorrow. Cool. Everyone have a good rest of your summer, and hopefully we'll see each other in person soon.
Thank you.